is good. Type in where you are calling in from, where you're watching from. Alberta's calling in from Philadelphia. Very nice. I grew up in South Jersey, so know Philadelphia very well. Anyone else, just so we can test the audio, if you hear me okay, please type into the box that you hear me just fine, and tell me where you're watching from. Participation is always good. And also when I ask a question, there may be like a little bit of a pause, because there's actually a pause between when I talk and, of course, when it gets transmitted over the internet. And then when you type, then there's also a delay. So sometimes there's like a funny little delay that happens when we get started. So thanks, Alberta, for confirming. Hey, Cheryl from New Mexico. Very nice. And Pasco, Washington. Very good. Thanks, Barbara. Awesome. Really excited to have everyone here tonight. I love doing these webinars, especially live, because we get people that I don't know, that I've never met, and it's very exciting to have you on so that we can talk about fasting, which is one of the things that has really been of interest to me lately. And I guess we'll looks like we can jump in and get started. So my name is Dr. Karp. I am a practicing dermatologist, actually, and it's sort of interesting how a dermatologist would be interested in something like fasting. And really what happened that precipitated this was many years ago in 2004. I've been in practice since the year 2000. I had a patient that came in who I had been treating for lupus, and I have a special interest in systemic lupus as well as psoriasis. And she came in and I had her on all these medications, and it was really scary because I had her on a lot of essentially organ transplant medications to try to control her lupus. And she came in and basically had her on lots of medicines, and she was able to get off of all of them through this lifestyle program that really was, she did on her own. At that time, I wasn't familiar with really lifestyle nutrition because it's really not taught in medical school. And when I saw this, and it was so profound, I jumped into the medical literature and was able to learn that, you know, lifestyle and nutrition, of course, makes sense, but reversing conditions, that was really something that was remarkable. And as I learned more and my practice started to change, I started to get interested in the scientific aspects of lifestyle management of systemic diseases, specifically autoimmune diseases. That's why lupus and psoriasis were really important to me, and because they can affect different organs in the body, and you can make such a profound change in these things by changing your lifestyle. When I got into lifestyle medicine, I still practice very conventional medicine, but I always mention to my patients that there are lifestyle things that they can do for themselves that can really improve and often reverse some chronic conditions that they have. And it's not uncommon for me to see patients with, say, psoriasis or lupus who were able to get off of diabetes medicines, high blood pressure medicines, only by lifestyle management. And that's what's really been the most exciting thing about my career. And really what is the most remarkable thing that I've seen since I've been a doctor. I grew up in a family of doctors. My father's a doctor and was an old-time doctor who did house calls. It was a small town in New Jersey, and we would go to the farmhouse and see patients. I'd carry his black bag as a little kid, and I grew up in medicine, and I grew up with old-time medicine where you would make a deep connection with the patient. And nowadays, it's hard to do that with the constraints, but I found through lifestyle medicine, through really educating people on how to become their own authorities in health, that's really been the most profound thing that I've seen, because it's ultimately your responsibility to become your own lifestyle medicine authority, your own authority in medicine. Sure, doctors are important. You need to rely on them in some cases for their expert advice. But when it comes down to making the final decisions for your health, ultimately that falls into your own lap. And my job, as I see it as a physician now, is to educate my patients to become their own authorities in health and I become the resource, the expert that they can ask questions for to make their own decisions. And that's really, I believe, what the future of healthcare is, the future of medicine, is people becoming more and more educated on how to take care of themselves in a lot of ways. And Pat is from South Padre Island. Yes, nice to, I know you well, Pat. Thank you for being a part of tonight. And if any of you have questions as we go through, this will probably be around an hour. And Pat is actually in my Weight Loss Awakening friendship group. That's the weight loss program, that a free group on Facebook. It's called Weight Loss Awakening. So you can go to Facebook and you can type that into the search bar and you'll see our Facebook group. And please feel free to join. We have a lot of great people in there, friendly and supportive, and goes through the weight loss plan that I recommend for people. And as I mentioned, if you have any questions, please do comment on them or write it in the chat box. I'll keep an eye on the chat box during the presentation so that if there's anything that comes up, that's what makes live so amazing. Definitely, take advantage of the fact that we're live so that you can ask questions and I'll be happy to answer them if it doesn't interrupt the flow. So that's about me. Of course, another thing about me, which is a little bit unusual, is that I took a trip to Japan in 2006, and I saw these remarkable noodles in Japan. And what makes them so remarkable is that they're 0-calorie noodles. And I started a business called Miracle Noodle. So you'll learn a little bit more about that in an unrelated fashion later on in the presentation. But I incorporate that sometimes into the weight loss programs that I give to people, because it's a noodle that is 0 carbs and 0 calories. And I started that business. So I practice medicine. I have a health food company as well. And lately, I've always been interested in fasting because it's been known for probably 100 years, I would guess. I remember some original studies that go back, well, maybe not 100, but maybe 60, 70 years, that autoimmune diseases, when people fast, a lot of them just completely go away. Of course, they come back when people start eating again. But the fact that that it was shown even many years ago that autoimmune disease, especially things like lupus, just turn off when people fast, is really a remarkable fact that's been known for a long time. What we haven't known is really all the science behind fasting. And so that's what the purpose of this lecture is, this webinar is to really start to understand the science behind fasting, the different types of fasting, what fasting mimicking diets are, and what this particular thing called the Prolon Fasting Mimicking diet is. So let's go to the next slide. And I'm just moving my screen around so that all of you can, so that I can see the chat box. So give me just a moment here and make sure I can see the chat box if any of you have questions. So fasting, essentially, we know fasting has been an integral part of the human diet, but essentially, as we evolved, food scarcity was a part of our evolution. And our bodies, in a remarkable way, came up with all of these mechanisms to be able to adapt to that. And we're going to go through those. It's really remarkable. It's miraculous, actually, that all of these things that happen when we fast are adaptations that improve our health. That's what's the most amazing thing, that somehow through this scarcity, we adapted to it in such a way that when we activate these mechanisms that are sort of inherent in our biology, we improve our health. That's what is most remarkable. Even more remarkable is that fasting has essentially been part of, all kinds of religious, just looking at the the chat box, religions throughout the past. I just recently read a report online that in the Muslim religion, when they have Ramadan and they fast from morning until Sunday, from sunrise to sunset, that has been shown to improve psoriasis. And it, of course, makes sense, because when you're doing any kind of fasting, you are activating, you're suppressing something called mTOR, which we'll get into later in the lecture, which basically is going to help is going to activate things that are going to help with any kind of autoimmune disease. What's also remarkable, and we'll talk about it again a little bit later, is that when you fast and your blood sugar is steady and you are in ketosis, which I'll go into all these words I'm using, many of you already know them, some of you don't. When you go through that, it's amazing, but you get this sort of evening out of your mood. And with the ketosis, your brain sort of comes alive. Because what happens is when you go into a fasting state and you start burning fat and you release these ketones, when you are fasting, evolutionarily, it sort of turns your mind on. Because think about it from an evolutionary perspective. When there was food scarcity, you would need to be super focused biologically to be able to find your next meal. So when you activate this, you also your mood evens out, your mind turns on. And when you go through this, when I hope all of you who are watching give this a try, if you qualify for that medically, what's amazing is you really begin to understand why fasting was then even incorporated into mystical and religious traditions, because your mind is in such a way that you really feel, especially if you are a spiritual person, an increased connection because your mood is even, your mind is alert, and prayer and meditation can be enhanced. And that never really occurred to me fully until I personally went into fasting. So fasting, of course, lately has been replaced by uninterrupted daily food intake, so much so that just 10 years ago, even nowadays, you still hear people recommending that you should just be eating all day long. The 5 meal a day diet, where people every couple hours you need to eat something. The fact is that your body has all of these mechanisms that run on cycles. And there was a great book called, blanking on the name, but the author's name is Satchipananda, Dr. Satchipananda. And basically it goes through how almost every organ in our body has a cycle. And when we're eating, that basically turns on one of the cycles. And if we're eating all of the time, we're depriving not just sort of the eating apparatus, but all kinds of other things in your body that require these cycles to go through. You sort of shut them off when you're eating all the time. And so that's why it's important to have a nice rhythmic cycle, because your body is going to be in a growth phase and a rest phase, an active phase, a rest phase, detox phase. There are all these different phases. So if you're eating all the time, your body doesn't rest to be able to go into that rest and detox phase. We'll get into that a little bit deeper later on. So in 2018, it's no surprise that fasting was the #1 diet pattern in the United States. And what was the most common was something called intermittent fasting. We'll go through the definitions, because basically intermittent fasting, it may or may not be what you think it is. And if any of you on the call are doing intermittent fasting, do let me know in the comments in the chat box. Paleo diet, gluten-free diet, low-carb diet, Mediterranean diet, so many different diets. What's remarkable about incorporating fasting is, it can be with any sort of eating pattern that you follow, and it allows your body to reset. And we'll explain why that is as we go through the webinar. So what is fasting? Well, fasting is basically, of course, we know, to abstain from food and beverage. But biological fasting is basically where you're activating the biological mechanisms of fasting when maybe you aren't necessarily eating, or you aren't necessarily abstaining completely from food. So to consume food basically triggers different food sensing pathways. We discussed this IGF-1 and mTOR. These things, when you elevate these two things, they are food sensing, but you can eat foods that don't spike these. Of course, fat, and so just going through that, the two things that raise IGF-1 and mTOR are animal protein and sugar. Both of these are going to increase IGF-1 and mTOR. The reason that that's important is because elevations of mTOR and IGF-1 are going to be associated with decreased longevity, decreased lifespan, increased cancer, increased heart disease. And as I said, just to repeat, the two things that really trigger that are sugary foods that spike your blood sugar, but also animal protein, certain amino acids in animal protein. So that's why in a great book called The Longevity Diet by Dr. Walter Longo, who we'll talk about in a little bit, who did some original studies, the original studies on fasting mimicking diets, basically came to the conclusion with all of these types of, all of the information on longevity, that sugary foods and high amounts of animal protein are going to shorten your life and increase your risk for a whole host of chronic diseases. Doesn't mean you have to be vegan. And also, there's no reason to permanently suppress mTOR necessarily, because it's a growth, it's involved in, growing muscles, and you're not supposed to permanently reduce these things. It's just that things go, as I mentioned, there's all these cycles. And we want to activate these cycles, and we want to lower, just generally having a lower level of IGF-1 and mTOR is going to benefit you in so many ways, but that doesn't mean that you have to completely be a vegan. It just means that there are cycles, and by by suppressing these two things through incorporating a fasting program into your life, you're maximizing the chances of increasing your lifespan from a scientific perspective. And again, we're going to be repeating lots of things throughout the webinar, because I want you to really understand the important things. But if you read the book, The Longevity Diet, and you look at the literature, you really come to the conclusion that increased sugary foods, or, finely milled grains that make your blood sugar go up, anything that makes your blood sugar spike, and amino acids from animal protein, those two things are really not consistent with long life, and not consistent with really trying to avoid chronic diseases as well. Misconception, juice fasting is fasting because it does not contain solid food. The point is basically that it has been determined by the studies at USC, which we'll get into a little bit in a little bit, that there are ways of actually eating food, specific foods in specific amounts, that will allow you to trigger or to suppress IGF-1 and mTOR. We'll get into it a little bit deeper, but still eat food. And that's what's called the fasting mimicking diet. And we'll get into that very, very shortly. So to review what we've come up to at this point, fasting originated in ancient evolution and healing traditions throughout millennium. It supports overall metabolic health, and it supports cellular cleanup, which is really amazing. What happens is when your body is in a fasted state, after a certain period of time, your body digests old cells. It's really remarkable. It's miraculous to think that, okay, well, you don't have any food, and your body needs to get energy from somewhere, so it's going to digest itself in some way. You hope that it's coming from fat that you don't want, but there are also cells around your body that are old that need to be cleaned out, and this cleaning out aspect gets activated remarkably day 3, 4, and 5 of a fast. Doesn't happen right away, and that's what makes extended fasts so much more beneficial for your body. It also impacts markers associated with increased human longevity and health span, which I mentioned in the last slide, but also you get activation of stem cells. And stem cells can be used by your body to repair all kinds of things. And again, they don't get activated unless you are fasting for an extended period of time, day 3, 4, and 5. And as you probably have surmised from what I've been talking about, there are ways of fasting without actually fully, giving up food on all those days, where you can activate these sorts of markers without having to completely do a water-only fast. So Cheryl, thank you for your comment. She fasts overnight from 5 p.m. To 8 a.m. or longer. So, and she tries to fast all day, night, once a month, about 39 hours. Very cool. Thanks, Cheryl. So here are the types of fasting. So we have time-restricted feeding, which is basically where you're trying to compress the window of your eating. So if you, instead of eating, a lot of people these days, they wake up let's say they wake up at 7 a.m. and they eat all day long until 10 p.m., you know, that's, and that's a long period of time. And then they start eating again at 7 a.m. What you want to do is constrict, sort of, you know, bring in the time. So if you started at 7, try to stop at 7, try to stop at 5, and see what you can do to get that time restricted window of eating in. There's some people that do one meal a day because there are benefits to your health. There's benefits in blood sugar. There's benefits just in people have high blood pressure. Remarkably, when they just constrict the time feeding window, it's remarkable. You can see, and there are people who get off blood pressure medicines just by constricting the feeding time, which is really remarkable. One caveat is if you have gallbladder issues, sometimes when you really constrict the window too much, people who have gallbladder issues, they can get flare-ups of their gallbladder issues. Then there's intermittent fasting, where you can do 1 to 3 days of fasting, usually non-consecutive. People usually, you know, do like 1 day a week, just like Cheryl does, or 1 day a month she does. I used to do 1 day a week when I wasn't traveling. I would do a Sunday fast, and I really found that to be beneficial for me. I don't do that anymore now that I have prolonged fasting because of day 3, 4, and 5, which I mentioned before, where you get your body, what's called autophagy. Your body basically digests all these old cells. I mean, think about how to me, that's miraculous. What's happening? Your body is preferentially offering up to, you know, your digestion cells it no longer needs, that it would like to get rid of, that you're not going to get rid of if you're constantly eating all the time. And you only activate that in its really maximal form by doing an extended or prolonged fast of 4 or more consecutive days. You get some of that starting at day 3, but you basically get day 4 and day 5 it's really where the magic happens. And you can do that through a water-only fast, which quite frankly, I don't think I would ever do. Even though I knew the science, I'm not going to go 4 or more days without eating food. It just doesn't seem to be something that would be good for me. I just don't think that would be good for me. In addition, unfortunately, when you do these long fasts, depending on your metabolic state, you're going to be losing muscle. But what we found with the fasting mimicking diet, the studies that have been done, because it's mimicking fasting, and we'll go into really what that specifically means, what's really remarkable is you don't get the muscle loss that you would get if you just did water-only fast. Also, you know, I don't really think I have to explain why I don't think I would ever do a water only. I'm not going to, for 5 days, not eat food. It just doesn't fit into my lifestyle. And I just think it probably should be done under some kind of supervision. There is an amazing place in the Pacific Northwest called the True North Health Center, where they have therapeutic fasts, and you can go there if you have an autoimmune disease, for a whole host of reasons. Lots of different conditions get better with fasting, and they have doctor supervised fasts. People fast up to 30, 40 days there. It's really remarkable. Your body, even if you're not heavy, has enough stores of fat to really do extended fast. But really, because of electrolyte issues and hydration, that's not something that's safe to do on your own. Whereas a fasting mimicking diet, which we'll get into very shortly, is something that you can do very readily. So here we go. We have calorie restriction, intermittent fasting, time-restricted feeding, prolonged fasting, and the fasting mimicking diet. So there are people who are on, for longevity or trying to lose weight, on calorie restriction. There's a 1,200 a day calorie diet. There are people who are on a program called the CR way, which is calorie restriction. Those people have figured out a way of doing it where there's not really a metabolic damage because they're eating high nutrient dense foods. The problem with calorie restriction for most people that I see, and I often recommend that they don't do it, is because yes, you can lose weight. Yes, you can get a cholesterol impact. Yes, you can get fasting glucose. The problem is not just the fact that you're not protecting your lean mass, that you're going to lose muscle, not that you're not necessarily activating what I mentioned before, the cellular cleanup, what we call autophagy, or increasing stem cells, which I mentioned occurs day 3, 4, and 5, more 4 and 5. The reason I don't like it is because when people are on calorie restriction for too long, they get metabolic damage to their body. Their metabolic rate changes to adapt, which means that when they eat again, they can sort of hold on to calories more than they did before. And it's just not something that I think is safe. Now, the people who do the CR way, like that's the name of the diet. Those people, again, they're very careful. They eat super nutrient dense foods, high nutrient dense fruits and vegetables. And so there is a way of doing that, but it's a lifestyle that not many people can do, even though it is the single most calorie restriction has been shown, at least scientifically, to be the most quite logical way of extending life. But it's not something that is really that I would do. I mean, I like to eat. So who doesn't like to eat? And sometimes I like to eat a little more than usual. So there are ways of doing that by activating those mechanisms through the fasting mimicking diet. Not that you can just do the fasting mimicking diet and eat whatever you want. That's not what I'm saying. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But intermittent fasting, of course, you get weight loss. There isn't necessarily a lean body mass protection. You get all of these things, no autophagy, no stem cell release. Time restricted feeding, really awesome. It's really the thing that I recommend everyone start if they're not ready for some of the other things. You do get weight loss. You do get a cholesterol impact. You get blood sugar impact. You also get generally you get high blood pressure lowering, and you can eat food, of course. Prolonged fasting, again, the big thing is really no lean body mass protection. And especially as we get older, we need to keep our muscle mass, because it's been shown that when you get older, you get something called sarcopenia, which is, where your muscle starts to decreases, but it also gets replaced by fat. And when it gets replaced by fat, it's not as metabolically active. So you end up eating less because you don't need as much food because your lean muscle mass is less. So which means that you don't necessarily get all the nutrients that you got before. And this turns into a vicious cycle where you don't eat as much, you don't get as many nutrients, the muscle continues to turn into fat. And this is one of those things about aging that we all need to be careful of. And it's something that I talk to my patients about quite a bit. You need to do some kind of resistance work to try to keep that muscle mass as best as you can. And quite frankly, as I mentioned before, there are increased protein needs as you get older. It doesn't mean that you need, it just means that you need to know how much protein to eat. As I mentioned before, that animal protein and sugary foods raise this thing called mTOR as you get older. And it's been studied that it looks like, when you get into your 70s, it's okay to eat a little extra animal protein if you need it. But still, of course, you need to eat your green vegetables. I'm not saying you turn into a heavy meat eater, just saying that as you get older, there are increased protein needs. You don't necessarily have to get them from animals necessarily. And then moving on to the fasting mimicking diet. And that's where it really ticks all the boxes. You get weight loss because you're eating a little bit of food, specifically based on the studies at USC. You are getting lean muscle mass, you're getting lean body mass, muscle protection, basically. You get cholesterol impacts that last beyond the fast, which is really great. And we'll go into that a little bit more in depth as we get to some further slides. Fasting blood glucose, really remarkable decreases by going through the fasting mimicking diet, which is 5 days. And again, we'll get into more detail about that. And then the magic again, which happens day 3, 4, and 5, where you get cellular cleaning and an increase in circulating stem cells. So what we call the autophagy and the increase in stem cells, day 3, 4, and 5. And you get to eat food, which is really great and makes it safer, makes it a whole lot more easy to do than some sort of prolonged fast where, in other words, very few people are going to do this. I do know people who don't eat for like 5 days a month, who just subsist on water and tea. But it's not something, again, that many of us normal people are going to do. I certainly am not. But I've done the fasting mimicking diet. I'm on my 4th cycle. I'm about to do my 5th. And I can tell you it's been the single most impactful health intervention I've ever done in my life, bar none, which is saying a lot for someone like me who's obsessed with health and obsessed with educating people about health. And again, this has been the most single most impactful thing that I have done for my health. And I can tell you that that sort of statement is not uncommon amongst my patients and people, clients that I've helped, online do this. It's really remarkable, but we'll get into that a little bit deeper. So water only fasting, of course, we went through all this. You get weight loss. There is metabolic health. There are cellular cleaning, that autophagy, and there's a stem cell priming. So there are absolutely benefits to doing water only fast. The problem is it's difficult. So I think we covered that. So prolonged fasting, of course, difficult to do. As I mentioned with the time-restricted feeding, if you narrow it too much and you have gallbladder issues, your risk is increased. Well, obviously, the same thing's going to happen here if you're doing a water-only fast. Doesn't preserve lean body mass because your body is going to take amino acids from your muscle in the beginning to sort of try to, or it can happen the whole time and those amino acids can get converted into blood sugar, which is a lot of people don't realize that when you overeat animal protein, those amino acids through a process called gluconeogenesis in the liver can actually be converted into sugar. So people who are on, say, what's popular now, you see people talking about the carnivore diet, where people are eating meat all day. If you look at those people's blood sugar, their average blood sugar, it's not low. It's oftentimes a little elevated. And the reason is because once your body doesn't have a place to store animal protein, it can get deposited into muscle, as if you're working out a lot. It has its uses, of course, for muscle cell turnover that naturally happens. You need amino acids, muscle turnover, anything happening in the body that is a protein that turns over, you need amino acids. But when you don't need more than a certain amount. When you get more than a certain amount, your body just converts them into sugar. So protein, which is another reason why it's not surprising from a metabolic perspective when people are overeating meat, that you're going to get increased risks of those things that I discussed: metabolic damage, diabetes, high blood pressure, cancer, and decreased longevity. And then, of course, there's with water only fasting, you're not getting any micronutrients, you're not getting any vitamins. So you're going through a period that is a stress on your body. It does absolutely activate very beneficial things, but unfortunately, it's difficult. And I think we sort of made our case here that if you're going to do prolonged fast, you really have to do at least 4 days, and that's difficult. So enter the fasting mimicking diet. Now, the fasting mimicking diet, as I mentioned before, was basically a study that was based on the research of Dr. Walter Longo at USC. It had received enormous amount of funding. It was very well done, and there were clinical trials. It was patented. It was published in top journals. This is real science, and basically, he created a way of being able to activate all those things that would be activated with fasting, but yet still be able to eat some food. It's a reduced calorie diet. It's a vegan diet because, again, we don't want to activate those signals that we discussed, the IGF-1 and the mTOR. We don't want to activate them with animal protein and sugary things. So it was designed to try to figure out how to get the benefits, these well-known, long-standing benefits of fasting, but allow people to do it in an easier fashion. I think it's one of the most remarkable things that I've been a part of. And We'll move on. So here's how it works. The fasting state, you basically it's 5 days, as we mentioned, and on the first day it's around 1,100 calories, and most people really don't have any problem on the first day. You get breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Breakfast is usually a nut bar, a honey nut bar, and then for lunch and dinner you get soups, and then there's some snacks. So day one is generally pretty easy. Day two, you drops to around 800 calories, and you really subsist on 800 calories a day for 5 days. But you get breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And usually day two is when your body basically starts to go into ketosis, when your body starts to burn sugar instead of fat. I'm sorry, burn fat instead of sugar. That transition, depending on the person, sometimes it can take to the third day. And for some people, the day two is a difficult day because it takes time for your body to become what's called metabolically flexible, when it's able to switch from burning sugar into burning fat. And for me, the first time that I did this, I really did have a little bit of a brain fog on day two. And then when I did the second time, I really switched into ketosis a lot easier. It was definitely easier. And the third cycle that I did, there was absolutely no, I immediately basically flipped into ketosis. I could tell because you know when you're in ketosis, generally speaking. Well, I shouldn't say that it's that easy, but when you've never been in ketosis, and that's another benefit to this diet, you go into ketosis. A lot of people are, you hear a lot about the ketogenic diet. Well, now if you do this, you'll get to know what people are talking about in terms of the increased focus and the feeling of being in ketosis. It's not so easy for people to get into ketosis as much as they think. A lot of people think you just eat a lot of fat and meat, and you eat avocados and coconuts and some meat, and you're going to go into ketosis. The problem with that, unfortunately, is that if your insulin levels are very, very high, and a lot of people in the United States, their insulin levels are high from chronic overeating, there is a hormone that is inhibited by elevated levels of insulin, which is needed to switch you over into burning fat, which means that, unfortunately, if your insulin levels are really, really high, that it can take you longer to get into ketosis because of your insulin levels. They don't drop right away. So a lot of people, if you ever, I'm getting off track here, but if you ever are interested in doing a ketogenic diet, for whatever reason, there are reasons for it and there are a lot of reasons against it. If that's beyond what we're talking about here, feel free to reach out to me if you do have any questions about that. At least know that if you plan on doing a ketogenic diet, you really need to read a book by an expert. You can't really do it just by assuming that I'm eating fat and therefore eventually I'll go into ketosis and I'll stay that way. You really need to educate yourself in a serious way about that. Okay, anyway, let's move on to day three. Day three is when cellular cleanup continues. Most people are in ketosis here. I think it's probably possible that there are people that don't get into ketosis until but most people are in ketosis here. And your brain wakes up. It really does. And you realize that you're in ketosis. Now, after doing it for so many cycles, my body is become metabolically flexible. And that ability is a healthy ability. It means that if I skip a meal, I'm traveling, let's say, and I skip a meal, I don't get headache and I don't get sick. My body is able to flip its energy from burning sugar to burning fat. I'm not on a ketogenic diet, but if I skip a meal, my body is capable of handling it in a way that doesn't cause me all that much trouble. So day four, you start to get that cellular regeneration, that autophagy. And then day five, the regeneration just continues. Usually, for me, I get just this regeneration. I don't know if that's why my sleep improves. I'm not really sure. I think it would be interesting to talk to Dr. Longo about the sleep, because many people report their sleep gets so much deeper. And day four and day five, the sleep is like you wake up and you just feel like you are just the sleep is just incredibly, incredibly deep. Day 5, you know, essentially you're hungry, but you're not, you know, I always tell people, patients, people who join me in our fasting group, when we all do this, that it's not easy, but it's not difficult. You know, day 3, especially when you do it with someone. The first time I did it with my sister. It really is beneficial to do it with somebody, and that's why I created the group, so everyone can do it together. And different people, if you make a comment, you know, you're have a question about something, you know, we've all been through it, or or other people are happening at the same time. People can chime in and be really helpful. Day 4, you really tolerate it well. Day 5, you're not even hungry, but you're missing some of the foods that you haven't eaten in a long time, even though it's been just 5 days. But you're really not hungry. You're totally adapted. And a lot of people are like, I want to go longer. Why don't I just continue? Well, it's been studied. You only need 5 days. And as I mentioned before, on calorie restriction, what's the negative? What did I mention? I mentioned that you continue to do something for this low calorie bit, and you're going to suffer metabolic damage. The magic here is that you're not going to suffer any metabolic damage in 5 days. It's been designed, it's been studied, and you don't have to worry about it. So all you need to do is 5 days. You get, you know, people often lose, you know, between 2 and I've had someone lose 10 pounds throughout the process. And if you do it the way that the original studies were done, which is basically 3 cycles, 5 days a month for 3 months. And you do it for 3 months. And then thereafter, the results, those metabolic changes with blood sugar decrease, weight decrease, cholesterol decrease, the studies that were done showed that you get persistence of those effects up to 3 months after the 3rd cycle, which is really incredible. What it means is that your body has metabolically improved. That's what it means. And just the ability to become metabolically flexible by doing these cycles every once in a while is so beneficial for you, just from a mood perspective. So that if you miss a meal, you're not crazy and you're not shaky, you don't have a headache. And this is something that really, for my sister in particular, I was already doing some fasting, but nonetheless, I knew that I wasn't as metabolically flexible as I thought, because the first was difficult, a little difficult, you know, a little brain fog on day 2. And then the 2nd cycle was a little less. And the third cycle that I did, absolutely nothing. I just immediately switched into it. For my sister, whenever she would miss a meal, basically she'd get shaky. That's completely gone now. She can miss a meal and it's really no big deal. So Pat's asking about a good keto book. Yeah, I mean there's so many. Honestly, there's one called I'm blanking on it. If it comes to me, I'll mention it, Pat. And you can contact me afterwards as well. Fat for Fuel is not bad by Dr. Mercola. That's a very good introduction. Very good introduction. Okay, so fasting and healthy weight loss. Prolon is basically the 5-day fasting mimicking diet is shown to help individuals with normal BMI lose 5.2 pounds of fat and 1.2 inches of waist circumference, while overweight lost greater than 8 pounds. And what's this thing about visceral fat reduction and protecting lean muscle mass? This is so incredible. And the reason it's incredible is because visceral fat, which is that fat around your abdomen, it's going deep into your body, really. It's surrounding your organs. That is not just sitting there. Fat is in metabolically active, especially visceral fat, which means it's releasing all kinds of inflammatory cytokines, these chemicals that are used to recruit your immune system for inflammation. And so when you have this fat around your organs, oh my gosh, it's not just sitting there. It's churning out all of these inflammatory things. So when you get reductions in visceral fat, it's affecting not just the fact that you're losing weight, but it's affecting the overall inflammatory state of your body. So the fact that there is a way of reducing that visceral fat, it's really remarkable. It really is remarkable. And the fact that you're eating food is the reason why you're preserving some lean muscle mass. So this is Dr. Walter Longo, and he's a director of the USC School of Gerontology, which is basically the study of aging, and really is really the guy that these have been known. IGF-1 and mTOR have been known for many, many years, but wow, to be able to, suppress these and to activate autophagy and stem cell activation, wow, I mean, it's really, really remarkable. So IGF-1, meaning low levels of IGF-1, have been associated with the longest living human populations. And this has been known for quite some time, but the ways of getting there and suppressing IGF-1 and mTOR have not been overly known, and now they are. So here we go. We got the fasting mimicking diet. As we mentioned, the magic happens day 3, 4, and 5, which helps promote cellular cleaning, reduces body fat, body weight and fat, not just body weight, because you don't want to just reduce muscle mass because of all those things that I discussed about how important it is to keep your muscle mass. And it decreases IGF-1, which we have said many times, and that stands for insulin-like growth factor 1, because it's very, very similar to insulin, which has been implicated in aging and disease, as we've mentioned many times. This is best in class, we say. There's been $46 million in research grants. This is real science. It's really exciting. I am, as I mentioned, I am a medical doctor, but I'm also the owner of a food company. And I would say, I don't know, maybe 6 weeks ago, I just coincidentally met someone over at Prolon, one of the guys over at Prolon, and I told him, my gosh, I'm doing these webinars on Facebook. And he looked at me and he said, why would you spend an hour of your time talking about Prolon when clearly you would make more money promoting your own product for an hour, and more money, promoting your business? And I said, the reason is because this has been the most impactful thing that I have done for my life. And I've seen remarkable things happen to people who have done this. And that is so remarkably satisfying that this is well worth my hour for all of you on here watching, to be able to express to you that the latest in science, this is the latest in science. It's available. It's not difficult to do if you qualify. The reason that I mentioned if you qualify, because not everyone qualifies. If you're on high doses, if you're on high doses of blood pressure medicine, if you're have diabetes, you need to do this with doctor supervision, and maybe not at all. But for people who aren't on those medicines, then you can do this. And I've created a quiz that you can take to see if you qualify. I'm going to post it. I'm going to post the product page on my site, Miracle Noodle, which again I haven't really discussed, but you'll get to know a little bit more about that as you do the fast, because it makes your afterwards and before your ability to stick to a healthier diet a lot easier. But again, we're focused more on Prolon here. If you go to the link in the chat box here, and you click there'll be a thing to take a quiz. It will ask you questions to see whether or not you qualify. The research continues to come in. They're still doing research, not to clarify what we already know. We already know what we know, which I've explained to you. What the research is being done to show further is, can we create a protocol for people with autoimmune disease or for very specific conditions to create a similar sort of process? Because technically we know fasting should help these things, and we know they do, but can we create a protocol that can be easily done for people? So they're working on a lot of exciting things over there. So what are the research results from the USC? Well, rejuvenation, wellness, health optimization, clinically studied to promote health span and longevity. Of course, health span people are defining as, how healthy you are over a long period of time. And you do feel there are many things that happen. First of all, we haven't even discussed the fact that you feel like you've done something for yourself in a very good way. In other words, you have done a 5-day fast. You feel really proud of yourself for sticking to it. It doesn't matter that they made it easy by giving you a box with 5 days of food. You stuck to it. They made it easy for you, but you stuck to it. You did it, and this has psychological benefits beyond what we're discussing. You feel empowered, which, as I mentioned from the very beginning, is one of the things that makes me excited because, as I mentioned, but my goal in life now is for me to educate my patients to become their own authorities in health. And when I see the ability of people to now have rejuvenated, more motivated, more ability to say no to foods that they shouldn't eat because they've done something good for themselves, and they can feel it. They can, you're going to feel, you're almost, I guess I shouldn't make promises, but almost everyone that goes through this feels so much better after they do this, that they become empowered and the results compound on top of each other. And you do another cycle, and you do the protocol as it's, I suggest you do it as the study showed, 5 days a month for 3 months, and you can make enormously impactful things in your life. But as I mentioned, as I just mentioned, that one of the things that's so exciting is what I just described, this ability for you to do something for yourself in a remarkable way. Also, you get this blood sugar stabilization. So a lot of what we call hunger is not really hunger per se. It's the fact that our blood sugar is spiking up and down. When you get more of an evening of your blood sugar, you are able to, you're not going to get the emotional ups and downs as well. So after you go through this, you don't have the cravings that you did before. Also because you're metabolically flexible, which happens even more as you do another cycle. So it's really remarkable. Weight management effect, as I mentioned, it's a fast way to lose weight in a healthy way. If you don't eat any food, most people average around 1 pound a day of weight loss. You don't want to lose it from muscle. That's the whole point, and that's why the mimicking diet is so remarkable, special. So most of it's from the fat while preserving lean body mass. And you really, with only 5 days of lifestyle change per month for 3 months. That's what's really remarkable. And the results last for a couple months thereafter. Pat's asking, after 3 months, do you wait 3 months, then do another cycle? Yeah, you do it every 3 to 4 months thereafter. For people who really want some sort of specific change or more aggressive change, I would say you definitely could do another cycle. You could do a cycle every month. I don't think you need to. That's the whole point. More of something is not necessarily better, unless you're working with your doctor and let's say you're scheduled for gastric bypass surgery, or that would be the best example that's coming to mind right now. And you just wanted to really have this dramatic metabolic change, or you've been diagnosed with prediabetes. Your doctor's telling you that if it doesn't change, in a couple months, you're going to be put on diabetic medicines. So that would be another situation where maybe you really want to do it a little bit more, not more than once a month. You don't need to do that, obviously. But I think the best way to do it would be to do it as the studies from USC showed, which is basically 5 days a month for 3 months, and then every 3 to 4 months thereafter. I am probably going to do it a little bit more just because it's been so impactful, but not in probably maybe 2.5 months, maybe 2.5. I'm probably going to do again in a week or two, and I think I did. So it's probably been around 7. No, it's probably been around 8 weeks. So maybe I'm doing it in 2 months. Anyway, you can determine that on your own, but the best thing to do is to do it as I described. You also get healthy levels of C-reactive protein, which is a general inflammation marker associated sometimes with heart conditions, with heart disease. you're going to get a net anti-inflammatory effect. Again, anytime you reduce the visceral fat, you're going to get a net anti-inflammatory effect. But this anti-inflammatory, it's not just visceral fat that's happening. You're getting metabolic improvements overall with decreased blood sugar, et cetera. And that's also just going to promote or reduce general inflammation. And you get, again, glucose, cholesterol, blood pressure, triglycerides. Really, these are all part of what's called metabolic syndrome, which a lot of people have. It's, people who have high triglycerides, all of these things are part of the definition of metabolic syndrome. And, you get onto diabetic medicines, which then leads to insulin. Sometimes it's hard to get off insulin, not impossible, but difficult. And it's this vicious cycle. So how do we go beyond just making simple changes, quote, simple changes? I start to eat healthier, I start to exercise more. Why not do something that's been studied, that can be done quickly in an ambitious way, but in a healthy way, and it's been studied? That's what makes this so exciting. Enhance patient well-being. Again, this is definitely, there's that psychological improvement that is beyond the metabolic improvement. The two probably go hand in hand. And you really do feel empowered to make healthier choices. You really, after you get through this 5 days, you're like, I can do anything. I can say no to those foods that's been difficult to say no to in the past. You really feel empowered. And that, again, is another reason why this just fits my philosophy so much. Getting patients, getting people who come to me for health advice, for whatever condition they come in for, feeling empowered to become their own authorities is my reason I'm here, I believe. So we've gone through all this again: glucose, insulin, IGF-1, cholesterol, an inflammatory marker, stem cell activation, remember, day 3, 4, and 5, lean body mass protection, and decreased visceral fat, that terrible fat that releases all those terrible things. And that is Prolon. That's Prolon. Now, you could, I forgot that I included this. So as I mentioned, if you buy Prolon tonight, you will get access to my fasting group. Now, everyone in there, most of the people in there are doing Prolon. There are people in there that aren't doing that, but the 95% of people are doing Prolon. And we have a lot of support in there, and you get to do it. You're not alone in this. You get access to me. We can schedule a phone call. I normally charge $300 an hour for a phone call. But this is part of Prolon because I am so passionate about this that in addition to the fact that you're getting an access to me in my fasting group, in addition to that, you get to, if you want, when you type in anything in there, I'm going to see it and I'll respond. But if you want to talk about what happens next and you want to set up a consultation with me, then you'll be able to do so, and we'll talk on the phone. I'm a laid-back guy, and I love talking to people. You get that. You get access to that. You also get access to, you're also going to get 10 bags of Miracle Noodles, which I'm throwing in as an incentive, which is going to help you later on. So you get access to me. You get access to my fasting group where you develop friendships with people who have gone through this, who will really support you and be with you through this process, even though I know you can get through it because almost everyone does. It's, as I said, it's not easy, but it's not difficult either. Here are some testimonials from people who have gone through the program. These were posted in our fasting group on Facebook. Total 5.5 pounds lost. Find myself still not hungry for lunch. I did eat my leftover dinner. How long does it take to start feeling hungry? And so basically, thank you, Dr. Carr, for sending out that initial email. Looking forward to that coupon as I'll be getting another box. Total of 10 pounds lost. It's just 5 days. Feeling great. Thanks for the support. I can't tell you how happy this makes me. This is like amazing to me. Lost 6 pounds, feel great. Hope that weight loss is more fat than water. Time will tell. Heart rate and blood pressure down as well. In this case, she was using miracle noodles. If that's something you want to do, combining them, we would need to talk about that. But really was never hungry, and I could see a 3-month ritual in my future. There are ways of modifying the food. The food is really good. It was all made in Italy. Flavor profiles are really good. There's one soup, the mushroom soup, that I add a little cumin and a little red pepper flakes. You can add a little seasoning to that sort of thing. So the food really is quite good. I probably should have mentioned that earlier. Really, it tastes good. Day 6 post-fast, feeling great. Feeling great post-fasting mimicking diet. Head is clear, more energetic. For sure, we'll be doing another fasting mimicking diet. Day 2, lost 2 pounds, blood pressure is lower. Yeah, normally I get the best sleep around day 4, day 5. It's just insane how good the sleep is. It's like you're in another dimension. When you wake up, you're just so rested. My 3rd day, and I feel fantastic, not hungry, no headache, no dizzy, no nothing, light and super happy. Round 2, day 5, lost 5 pounds. Day 5, round 2, check my weight again. Weight today, lost 4 pounds. Second round, definitely so much easier because, as I mentioned, metabolically flexible. You become metabolically flexible. People often do ketogenic diets specifically to become metabolically flexible. You don't have to do that. You can eat healthy without going into a ketogenic diet, but be metabolically flexible by doing a fasting mimicking diet every once in a while. This is second fast. Second time was way easier. As I just mentioned, the reason for that, barely hungry. My body felt less bloated and relaxed. It feels as if my stomach shrunk. And that would be awesome because it would not help me overeat. My husband did it the second time too, and he looks amazing. He lost any sign of fat and is so shredded. So you get a sexier spouse, apparently, according to this person, if you do it together. And it really does. I mean, I formed the group so that we would be able to do it all together. But it'd be great if you did it with your spouse as well. Finished day 5, down 11 pounds, feeling wonderful. Noticeable slimming of my stomach and face. And most pleasantly, the daily pain I had in my feet is significantly improved. The net anti-inflammatory effect of fasting without having to avoid all food. So that's Prolon. I really look forward to all of you joining me soon. The bonuses that I've discussed, being able to talk to me on the phone, to plot out the next stage of your improved health journey, whatever that is, access to the group where you'll join others who have done it. You'll get friends who have done it. You'll get a lot of support from everyone there. And then 10 free bags of miracle noodles as well that I'm throwing in there. I truly believe in this. I believe that you can do this because everyone has had such remarkable impacts. So I invite all of you to really go to the link that I have mentioned, take the quiz anyway, and just see if you qualify. Hopefully you do qualify. And if you do, I do. And sometimes what happens when you take the quiz, if there's one thing that maybe you don't qualify, one thing that sort of raises a red flag, you'll be directed to a calendar to schedule a free consultation with me where we can see if it's real or it's not. And I'm willing to, again, I love talking to people. I'm willing to discuss whatever questions you may have on that phone call and really, and to see if this is right for you, if there aren't some pre-existing health conditions that might not allow you to do it. To see if that's the case, you should take the quiz by clicking on the link that's in the chat box, miraclenoodle.com/products/Prolon, and it'll take you to the page on my site that will allow you to take the quiz. And the reason I put it on this site, again, is because we're going to be adding 10 free packs of Miracle Noodles. Prolon sells it for the exact same price that I sell it for, but I wanted to add these in because these bonuses make all the difference in the world for long-term improvements, the support, the conversation with me, the noodles, how to incorporate those noodles into your diet after the fast. All these things make it really, to me, it's really a powerful combination to make a serious impactful um, impact into your health. So we've gone a little bit over. I'll stay on for another minute as I sort of clean up my desktop here. If you have any questions, please do type them into the box. I really appreciate all of you that are on here. Alberta, Cheryl, Barbara, Pat. Can't see the full list anymore, but if you do have any questions, please do type them into the box. Feel free to join Weight Loss Awakening on Facebook. If you have any questions, that's the best place to reach me if you have any real questions. And what can I say? I appreciate that everyone really remarkably stayed on for the entire, we had hardly anyone leave the webinar, which is, in this day and age of webinars and online things, is really remarkable. So thank you all for sticking in here. I hope you can feel how excited I am about this program and why I feel like spending an hour on a Thursday night is really beneficial. And I look forward to all of you really joining me on this journey sometime in April. Because all of these bonuses that I mentioned are not going to be available really at all. I may, ideally, they're definitely going to be available tonight. And so if you're thinking about doing it, you should do it tonight so you get access to all those bonuses. And I look forward to getting to know you. So I hope all of you have a good evening. Again, thank you so much for your attention. It was, I appreciate the participation as well. And thank you again. I look forward to getting to know you. Bye-bye.